Security, remove her now. She does not belong in this room.
I was invited.
Ask your daughter's own wedding planner.
They told me you took money and vanished. I took nothing.
I took nothing. Someone erased me from your life, Daniel.
The merger clause hands my father's entire company to your family.
Marriages end. That contract was always the real prize.
The moment Chanel Price saw the groom's face across the ballroom, the 5-tier wedding cake in her arms nearly slipped from her hands. That face belonged to Daniel Cho, the Korean billionaire she had loved with everything she had. The man who vanished from her life 5 years ago, right when she needed him the most. And now he stood at the altar of the Grand Empire Hotel, minutes away from marrying another woman, completely unaware that fate had just wheeled his past straight through the ballroom doors. Chanel's heart slammed against her ribs. Around her, 300 of Empire City's wealthiest guests filled tables draped in crystal and white orchids, none of them knowing that the woman delivering the wedding cake had once shared a home, a laugh, and a promise with the man at the altar. A small hand tugged at her dress. "Mommy," Micah whispered, staring up at her with wide brown eyes. "Why do you look like you saw a ghost?" Chanel forced a smile for her 5-year-old son. She didn't have the words yet to tell him that the man in the black tuxedo was about to meet his own child for the very first time. She should have turned the trolley around right then. Instead, her feet carried her closer, wheels squeaking softly against the marble. Her eyes locked on Daniel's profile like she was still dreaming. Near the entrance, an older woman in a modest gray suit went pale at the sight of her. Grace Lim, who had managed every detail of Daniel's household for 30 years, pressed a hand to her chest and looked away, guilt flickering across her face before she could hide it. Chanel didn't notice. She didn't see the woman in emerald silk moving toward her until it was too late. "You." Margaret Hale's voice cracked across the ballroom like a whip. Vivian's mother, powerful, polished, and suddenly furious. "Security! Get this woman out of here now." Heads turned. Phones rose. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through dry grass. "I was hired to deliver the cake," Chanel said, keeping her voice steady even as her pulse roared in her ears. "Ask your daughter's own wedding planner." Margaret stepped closer, low enough that only Chanel could hear. "I know exactly who you are. And you took the money 5 years ago to disappear. So disappear. Now before I make a scene you won't recover from." 2 guards seized Chanel's arms. Guests gasped. Someone laughed behind a raised champagne flute. And for one unbearable moment, Chanel Price, who had built a bakery from nothing, who had raised a son alone through 3 jobs and sleepless nights, stood in the center of Empire City's elite and was treated like something to be swept out with the trash. Before we go any further, hit subscribe, tap that like button, and comment where you're watching from right now because what happens next changes absolutely everything. In the commotion, small fingers slipped free from Chanel's grip. Micah broke away, darting between silk gowns and tailored suits, straight toward the altar. Straight toward Daniel. He stopped in front of the groom, small chest heaving, and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a broken silver chain and held it up like an offering. "Mommy said this used to be yours," Micah announced, his child's voice somehow carrying across 300 silent guests. "She keeps it in her jewelry box. She thinks I don't know, but I do." Daniel Cho went completely still. He knew that locket. He had not seen its twin in 5 years, not since the night everything in his life had quietly, permanently changed. "Where?" he asked slowly, kneeling to the boy's height. "Did your mother get this?" "From you," Micah said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "She said you gave it to her and said something about forever." The ballroom, for the first time all evening, went completely silent. Vivian, radiant in white, froze at the top of the altar steps, her bouquet trembling. Margaret's face drained of color, her eyes darting to the locket in Micah's small hand with something close to panic. "Security now," Margaret snapped, but her voice had lost its edge. Daniel raised a hand, and every guard in the room stopped moving. He hadn't taken his eyes off the boy. "Who is your mother?" he asked quietly. Micah pointed, and 300 heads turned to follow his small finger, straight to Chanel, still pinned between 2 guards near the entrance. Something shifted behind Daniel's eyes, disbelief giving way to something sharper, something almost frightening in its intensity. "Let her go," he said. "Now." The guards released Chanel instantly. Guests leaned forward in their seats, murmuring behind gloved hands and folded programs. Vivian's father whispered urgently to his daughter, who didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the little boy at the altar. And Daniel Cho, chairman of Cho Global, a man who had not lost control of a room in 15 years, felt the entire foundation of his life quietly begin to crack open. He crossed the ballroom in long strides, ignoring Margaret's hissed warning, ignoring 300 watching faces, ignoring his own bride standing frozen at the altar behind him. 5 years, he said, stopping in front of Chanel, his voice low and raw. 5 years, and you never once tried to find me. I did try. Chanel's chin lifted, even as her eyes burned. For months. I called your office so many times your assistant stopped putting me through. I was told very clearly that you didn't want to hear from me again. I never said that. I never would have said that. I know that now. Her voice cracked on the last word. 5 years too late, Daniel. Where have you been? Where has he been? His eyes flicked to Micah, still standing bravely between them, watching two adults he barely knew with wide, solemn eyes. Working, Chanel said. Surviving. Raising your son alone because I believed, for 5 years, that you chose money and status over both of us. The word landed like a slap. Daniel flinched. I was told you took a payout, he said quietly. That you left with another man's money and never looked back. I believed it because I didn't want to believe you'd simply stopped loving me. I never stopped. Chanel's voice broke completely now. I just stopped believing you'd ever come looking. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Around them, the wedding of the year balanced on a knife's edge, and every phone in that ballroom was recording a moment neither of them would ever be able to take back. Before the truth breaks wide open, subscribe now, hit that like button, and tell me your city in the comments, because this next twist changes everything. Someone show me proof, Daniel said, turning slowly toward Margaret. Because I think we both know exactly who benefited most from Chanel vanishing 5 years ago. Margaret laughed, brittle and thin. This is absurd, Daniel. She's clearly here for attention or money or both. Then you won't mind explaining, came a new voice, calm and steady, why I still have the voicemail. Every head turned. Grace Lim stepped through the crowd, her phone held high, her hands trembling. I kept it for 5 years, she said, tears in her eyes. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I was wrong, and I have been sorry every single day since. She pressed play. Margaret Hale's own voice filled the ballroom, cold and unmistakable, giving instructions to pay off the baker, and to make certain she believed Daniel never wanted to see her again. Gasps swept through the crowd like fire through dry grass. Somewhere near the back, a guest's champagne glass shattered against the floor. That recording is old, Margaret said, too fast, too loud. It proves nothing. It proves everything, Daniel said. His voice had dropped into something guests recognized from boardrooms, not weddings. You separated me from the mother of my son for 5 years. And I want to know why. Vivian stepped down from the altar at last, her face pale but strangely calm, her wedding dress pooling around her heels. Mom, she said quietly, is this true? Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in her daughter's life, she had no answer ready. Vivian, sweetheart, everything I did for your future. You mean for yourself, Vivian said, and something in her voice had gone flat and cold. How long have you known about Micah? Margaret said nothing, which was answer enough. Around them, guests who had spent the last hour whispering behind their hands now watched openly, unashamed, phones still recording. The woman who had once ruled Empire City's social calendar with a single glance stood exposed in front of everyone she had ever tried to impress, and for the first time, the Hale family's grip on the room had completely visibly collapsed. Daniel guided Chanel and Micah into the private garden room off the ballroom, away from the cameras and the whispers. For a moment, the billionaire and the baker simply stood in silence, 5 years of grief hanging heavy between them. I looked for you, Daniel admitted quietly. For almost a year. I hired people. I checked every hospital, every shelter, every address I could think of. I told myself I'd stop looking when it stopped hurting. Did it stop? No, he said. It never once stopped. Chanel wrapped her arms around herself. I worked 3 jobs to keep him fed. I lost my first bakery. I nearly lost the second one too. I told myself you'd chosen this life, this world over us, and I hated you for it. I hated myself more because some nights I still loved you anyway. Daniel knelt down in front of Micah, his composure finally cracking. I'm sorry I wasn't there, he said, his voice thick. I'm sorry for every birthday I missed, every first day of school, all of it. Micah studied him with the fearless honesty only children have. Are you my daddy? The question hung in the air, simple and enormous all at once. Yes, Daniel said, and something in his chest broke open. Yes, I am. And I am never going to miss another day, if your mom will let me try. Micah considered this seriously, the way small children consider the biggest decisions in the world. Then he held out the broken locket. You should have your half back, he said. Mommy kept it safe for you the whole time. The garden room door burst open. Margaret stood there, her fury restored. You think a recording changes anything? She snapped. I will have lawyers question paternity. I will question her character in every newspaper in this city. I will make sure no bank in Empire City ever looks twice at that little bakery of hers again, before I let some woman with an apron destroy my daughter's future. She's not the one who destroyed anything, Mom. Vivian appeared in the doorway behind her, arms crossed, eyes red but steady. You are. And I want to know exactly why you were willing to blackmail a stranger and lie to the man I loved for 5 straight years. Margaret's jaw tightened. For the first time all evening, real fear flickered behind her carefully lined eyes. You don't understand what's at stake, Margaret said quietly. Then explain it, Daniel said, rising to his feet. Micah's small hand still curled protectively in his. Because I am done being managed. Before we reach the twist nobody saw coming, subscribe, hit like, and drop your city in the comments, because Margaret's real secret is far bigger than one wedding. Grace stepped forward again, holding a second set of papers, her hands still trembling. I found this while I was searching for the recording, she said. Buried on page 40 of the merger contract. Daniel took the papers and read in silence, his jaw hardening with every line. There's a clause, he said finally, looking up at Margaret. The moment I married Vivian, 41% of voting control in Cho Global would transfer, quietly, to Hale Industries. The room seemed to tilt. You didn't separate me from Chanel because you cared about your daughter's happiness. Daniel's voice was ice now. You did it because a broken heart is far easier to manipulate into a merger than a man who is genuinely in love. You needed me unattached, unguarded, and grateful for a second chance you personally arranged. Vivian was never the real target. My company was. Vivian pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes filling. This whole wedding, she whispered, was never about me at all. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small worn half of a silver heart. He had carried it quietly for 5 years. He pressed it against the half in Chanel's palm until the 2 pieces clicked together, whole for the first time since the night he'd had them made. Engraved inside, still legible after everything, were 4 small words. Forever starts today. I had a ring picked out, he said quietly, only to Chanel now. I was going to propose the week you disappeared. Forever was never a word I said lightly. It still isn't. Get her out of my hotel, Daniel said, turning to the guards, and this time they moved on his command, not Margaret's. Guests parted as Margaret was escorted back through the very ballroom where she had once ordered Chanel removed, her heels echoing sharply against the marble, her name already spreading through whispers and phone screens that would not stop by morning. Vivian didn't cry as her mother was led away. She simply turned to Chanel, standing quietly with Micah's hand in hers. I'm sorry, Vivian said. For all of it. You and your son deserved so much better than what my family did to you. Thank you, Chanel said softly, and she meant it. By the next morning, Empire City's business channels were calling it the most explosive wedding collapse the city had ever seen. Cho Global's board opened an emergency review of every contract Margaret Hale had ever touched. Hale Industries stock dropped before the markets even opened. But inside the quiet garden room the night before, none of that had mattered nearly as much as a small boy finally holding his father's hand, Or a woman who had survived 5 years of heartbreak finally standing, unshaken, in the full light of the truth? One more thing before we finish this story. Subscribe, hit that like button, and comment your city below because what Daniel does next will stay with you. Daniel didn't propose that day. He didn't ask Chanel to forgive 5 years of pain in a single afternoon, and he never once acted like he was owed a shortcut back into her life. Instead, he showed up. He showed up at Sweet Magnolia Bakery every morning for a month, sleeves rolled up, learning to frost cakes badly and laughing at himself when the buttercream slid sideways. He showed up at Micah's kindergarten graduation, sitting in a folding chair between tired parents instead of a private box, clapping louder than anyone in the room. He showed up for Chanel again and again, not with diamonds or apologies wrapped in press releases, but with time, patience, and the plain, unglamorous truth every single day, until trust slowly stopped feeling like a risk. One evening, as the bakery closed and golden light spilled gently through the windows, Daniel took both halves of the little silver locket, already joined, and pressed it gently into Chanel's palm. "Forever starts today," he said again, quieter this time, meaning it completely. "Not because of a ring and not because of a wedding. Just because it's true, and I intend to keep proving it, for as long as you'll let me." Chanel looked at the man who had finally, fully earned his way back into her life and her son's. She thought of every hard year behind her. Every night she had raised Micah alone and told herself a love like this didn't come back around twice. And for the first time in 5 years, she let herself believe him completely. "Okay," she said softly, smiling through tears. "Forever starts today." Sometimes the truth takes years to surface, but it almost always does. And when it finally does, it finds the people who were strong enough to survive the wait. If this story moved you even a little, then you are exactly who this channel was made for. I am so glad you are here on Empire City Romance Stories, where every single story is about strength, hidden truth, and love that refuses to stay buried forever. Subscribe now so you never miss the next story. Tap that like button if Chanel and Daniel earned it from you tonight, and turn on notifications so you're always first in line for what's coming next. Tell me in the comments, if you were Chanel, would you have given Daniel a second chance? I read every single comment, so don't be shy, and let me know where in the world you're watching from tonight. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. I will see you in the next one.